Hi, Kate. Patricia Schechter here from Portland State University in Oregon, pitching me and my new book as possible candidate for your Drafting the Past podcast. So my book just out this summer is called El Terrible, Life and Labor in Pueblo Nuevo, 1887 to 1939. And it tells the story of a coalfield society in southern Spain, in Andalusia. And I think it's a timely story for a number of reasons for 2024. One is it situates this town, this community, in the history of transnational capitalism. So the site was dominated by a company in the portfolio of the French Rothschilds. Of course, the Rothschilds story has been told many times, but the story of working people, less so. And so based on never used before sources, I tell the story of working people, how they created a town, how they built unions, and won successful strikes in a way that's really salient for our own moment, where we're seeing also a resurgence of organized labor, some very important strike victories, both in the United States and beyond. So the book is chapter by chapter a fine-grained social and microhistory of working people that makes innovative use of a number of sources, including prison records and other sort of challenging social history sources to recenter, right? To recenter the voices of everyday people in the construction of a kind of workers' republic, if you will, a self-directed community in a time that was still dominated by strong forces of capitalism, right? So it's a really pointed tale about what's possible, right? What's democratically possible then and now. The other thing about this book is it's also a passion project, has a family history connection for me. My great-grandfather, Jose, was a highly placed government official at City Hall during the critical decade of the 1930s, when Spanish society became very polarized, left-right, between Republicans and fascists, and sort of this whole question of sides within my family, especially around my great-grandfather, has always been sort of shrouded in mystery. So that was a driver, again, kind of resonant for our contemporary times. And sort of spoiler alert, I really didn't find much about my great-grandfather, Jose, but instead the archives revealed, I think, this really compelling prequel, if you will, to my family story around how working people took control over their destiny and made choices, but also, so in the making of this town, but also how the forces of reaction galvanized really against this town. And so my book tells both the making and the unmaking of Pueblo Nuevo. And that's a story about creeping fascism in the 1920s, not under Franco in the 1930s, but in Cordoba province in Andalusia, where this town is set. We can see how reactionaries, monarchists, and other conservatives really wrote the fascist playbook on the backs of mining families who were not, as the headlines might have indicated and how historians may have followed suit in terms of characterizing mobilized labor. They were not, in Pueblo Nuevo, insurgent anarchists, but they were highly disciplined pacifists and principled socialists. So, again, a very important reminder about both the power of democracy and its fragility, and how step by step this community was kind of taken apart by anti-democratic forces in ways very similar to what's going on in our contemporary time. And finally, my last argument for maybe a possible spot on your podcast is this village tale contains some really engaging folklore about its identity and its own history, that the myths and stories that people tell about themselves in Pueblo Nuevo has to do with a dog. So the animating story behind the coal discovery is that a shepherd's dog named Terrible actually made the surface strike, made the discovery of coal, digging a hole one day to sleep in during siesta, and came up all blackened with coal dust back in the 1840s. So this dog was named Terrible, which is a name like spike or killer in the English lexicon. And the mine that this animal discovered was also named La Mina Terrible. And then the town that grew up around the mine, when people got together to name their municipality, they took the name Pueblo Nuevo, New Town, del Terrible, of Terrible. And to this day, this attachment to this animal, to this story, and to the kind of rural economy in which a shepherd dog functioned is commemorated in the town square and remembered very passionately, I would say. And so it's more than a local color story. It's really the figure of Terrible, this shepherd's dog, is really a sign of how Spanish working people, rural workers, attached to their community, attached to their landscape, and claimed an identity, right? Claimed an identity that's very distinct, I would say, for its time, both in the Iberian Peninsula and larger context of Europe, in which towns and town squares are typically anchored by symbols of wealth, large mansions or castles, symbols of military power like fortresses, or, of course, by a major church or cathedral in which Christianity and Catholicism's power is sort of centered right over the commons, over the town square. So, unlike these, sort of standard formulas, Pueblo Nuevo del Terrible remains marked as rural, as part of working people's landscape and survival traditions in the countryside, and yet breaks down these very binaries between rural and urban, because it was an industrial center and in many ways fully modern, which was part of what provoked the forces of reaction against it. So that's my pitch. Thank you so much for listening. I have my contact information in the links below this, in the description below this YouTube video, and I'm easy to find online. Patricia Schechter in the History Department at Portland State University. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to hear from you sometime. Thanks.